All right, everybody. I hope you are doing well. Today I'm going to talk about your next project, which is typographic illustration. So I'm going to explain what that is. Let's talk first about what typography is. So, actually, believe it or not, I took a whole class in college just on typography. There's a lot to learn with this. You probably don't even think about it so much. We look at fonts that are created already and don't really realize that they actually break down into smaller pieces based on what they are. But basically, typography is the balance and interplay of letter forms on a page. It's the study and process of typefaces, how to select, size, arrange, and use them in general. The class next door with Mrs. Pilarski usually goes into a little bit more detail on this if you were to take it for the graphic design class. So, just something to think about if this is something that interests you. But of course, we are going to be doing a project by hand. So, I want you to think about how words can be used in a design. Let's start with the one on the left. So, this one is made up of letters and the number 0, and that is it. But because of the slant of the 0, it essentially turns into an artwork of sorts, really. Instead of having the zeros repetitively going in the same direction, there's a flow to this. It almost kind of makes, if you can kind of see it, it's like a letter Z in the background. Maybe you need to squint. But we can really use these letters and words to create a design. Even on the right, I would imagine most of you know who this is depicting, even if you haven't seen the movies. And, think about how this whole thing of the Joker was depicted basically with just letters. This one incorporates color into the letters as well, but there are no actual lines really within this. It's just lettering. Here's another one. This is an advertisement for Converse. But what's the first word that you see here? First thing I noticed when I looked at this was the word envy right above the Converse patch, star patch. Um, then I kind of started to pick out like respect, rock star, basketball. So again, there are no actual lines within this design. It is just done with letters and words. And the words are iconic words that sort of represent the history of Converse and some of the famous basketball players that wore the Converse, and also just this concept of um, fashion statement, etc. Kind of an iconic design. And again, the use of color in this, red, you'd probably imagine these are red Converse, and then gray is used to depict the other parts of the shoe. All right, here's another example that kind of relates to the project you're going to be doing. So again, we have Audrey Hepburn on the left and Kanye West on the right. And again, they are just basically designed out of words and letters. A little bit of color in the Audrey Hepburn one on the left, and the one on the right of Kanye is all black and white. And the words, you probably can't read them from where you're sitting, but it is the lyrics, don't worry, the clean lyrics to some of his music. All right, so here's what you are going to do. These are the objectives for this next assignment. You are going to create an artistic image using 90% typography. So most of your image is going to be done not by actually drawing out lines or shading or details, but using letters, words, and numbers to make your designs instead. Another objective is to study the letter forms for shape and come up with ideas that will add details to your desired outcome. You'll use design principles that we've talked about to create a successful image, focusing on contrast and proportion in particular. So contrast comes through basically what size and shape you make the letters, how large on the page they appear is how they relate to proportion. And then you'll also potentially use color theory or value in order to create the depth and layering. We'll talk more about color choices in just a moment. So, where do you start with this? Well, of course, like with everything else we do, you're going to brainstorm. You're going to think of images that may be successful as a typographic work of art. Make sure you think about composition. What will work well? What has a balance of not too much or too little detail? So you don't want to do something that's really, really complex and full of all of these small areas and small details, but you also want something that is reasonably interesting to look at too. And of course, on the right side, I snuck in a typographic illustration of brainstorming. Did you see what I did there? All right. Then you can find out font styles that you might like. You can preview or even download them if you need to, and you can print out font alphabets for reference. Some of my favorite sites are dafont.com. I use this a lot when I am importing fonts into Adobe Photoshop. I'm going to guess, I haven't tried yet, but I'm going to guess that these cannot be downloaded to a Chromebook. But I haven't tried, so it's very possible they could be. But either way, even if you can't download them, you can still see them. There's some that are recently added up here, and then there's tons and tons and tons that are in these menu options here at the top. So really interesting. You can also search or go alphabetically. Just look for popular ones. But there's some really neat stuff up here. I'm just going to jump on. Let's go to medieval. So you can see these, and then what you can do is actually click on it, and usually it'll open up, and it should give you like the whole alphabet here, so you can use that to see the different letter styles. Then you can also go to fonts.google.com. There are all the Google fonts here. Even though only the most popular ones show up when you're formatting a document in Google Docs, but Google actually has over 1,200 fonts. So you can look through these also and get some ideas for lettering styles. Lastly, a new website is creativemarket.com/fonts. These are a little bit more design inspired, related to digital media, but I think there's still going to be some interesting ones here. And some of these might even give you ideas for the design itself if you haven't come up with that part yet. So feel free to check these out and look at some of these fonts on here too. You can use as many fonts or styles of fonts as you would like, or you can also just stick to one. So if one works and it's going to work for your whole design, and you can make it different, sizes or different thicknesses for contrast, then maybe it'll work fine just to stick with one type, or you can use multiple. And of course, you are going to start with a sketch. So I would recommend lightly, of course, and in pencil, you can start sketching out the primary subject matter of your composition. I would say that this does not need to be a sketchbook first item. I think if you have a solid idea in mind, since it doesn't require a whole lot of detail, I would say you're safe to start right on some final paper if you are ready to do so. I don't necessarily think you have to do it in the sketchbook first unless you want to. Remember that the words are the main focus of the design, so don't get too hung up on perfection, details, or shading. You've done contour lines before? Remember doing your shoes? So I know you can do this just fine. And don't forget, get some reference images. If you know that you want to do some type of an animal or whatever it might be, use a reference image from online, or you can print one to the AHS Artroom printer too. You have lots of options here. Just some additional things to think about. You can incorporate color, or it can be in black and white. Black and white obviously has greater impact. I would think the one on the right probably is more striking as far as contrast. However, the one on the left is also really eye-catching because of the use of color. So you might have to decide what you think is going to work the best for your particular design. A few reminders for this project. You want to remember that color, or a lack of color, if you just choose to do black, white, or gray, should be intentional and chosen for a specific reason. The same goes for the fonts chosen, so make sure that you pick something that matches the style of your picture. Overlapping or changes in opacity will help in creating depth and shadows. Opacity is, when we are drawing, it is how light your lines can be. If you're familiar with the digital media class, you'll know that opacity is kind of like how see-through something is when you do different layers. But in the case of this project in particular, lighter, thinner lines are going to be more transparent. Take your time, but be aware of your time management, if that makes sense. So the quality of work will show through your patience and your decisive actions. So, of course, like I've said before, reach out with any questions. If you need help with brainstorming, definitely use the people at your table or the adults in the room as a resource for someone you can talk to get some ideas. And the internet is a wonderful tool. Remember, you are not going to plagiarize or copy something that someone else had done, but it does not hurt sometimes to look at what other people have done for things like this and to get some ideas that might help you and kind of act as a springboard for an idea for yourself. So I hope you have fun with this. I think it's going to be a great project you're really going to enjoy. Take your time, because remember, just kind of like with the Zentangle project that we did, the more detail, the more interesting this could potentially look. All right, everybody, take care.